Well, earlier this week, we learned that hackers linked to China hacked into the U.S. government. Well, now some things have come to light, letting us realize that this hack was a little bit more serious than what we were first told. These hackers may have accessed security clearance info for U.S. intelligence as well as military personnel. Now, obviously, much more damaging than the original vague story that, a few personnel files were accessed and things. Just a little cybersecurity breach. Now, the forms that were accessed were known as Standard Form 86. And these require applicants to fill out very personal information. This includes histories of mental illness, past arrests, any backgrounds in previous alcohol or drug problems, arrests, things like that. And one of the big things that they're telling us is that they've also accessed all of the social security numbers, which were not encrypted. J. David Cox, who is the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, said in a letter that we believe that the central personnel data file was the targeted database and that the hackers are now in possession of all personnel data for every federal employee, every federal retiree, and up to 1 million former federal employees. And the union believes that these hackers stole military records and veterans status information, address, birth date, job and pay history, health insurance, life insurance, and pension information, as well as age, gender, and race data. So obviously, this is a huge data breach. And of course, of utmost concern at the present moment are those U.S. employees who are stationed overseas, and especially in countries like China. Now, a cybersecurity failure that is just so huge with this is the fact that they did not even encrypt these people's social security numbers. So this just means that all the wrong people can do all sorts of awful things with these people's identities. Now, what we're also learning that makes this OPM hack such a catastrophe is that it went undetected for more than a year. The NSA did not discover the malware here. They did not discover this hack. Totally useless agency there, the NSA. A private company discovered that there was Chinese hackers linked into the government system. So it was a private company giving the Office of Personnel Management a software demonstration, trying to show them how they needed to update their software. And it was then that they discovered that indeed Chinese hackers had installed some malware there in this agency. So hopefully this private corporation, this private company was awarded a contract. But these are the people that are taking all of our metadata and telling us not to worry about it. These are the people that we're supposed to be trusting with all of our health insurance when they want to federalize the health, completely change the way that we do healthcare in this country, and we're supposed to be trusting them with our personal information. So I'm sure that we're not going to hear the argument, oh, well, if you've got nothing to hide, then why are you worried about it now that it's actually going to be affecting people who work directly there in the government? So we're not really, this isn't really a big threat. The fact that Chinese hackers could hack into the government, infiltrate the Office of Personnel Management, and the NSA didn't even catch it, that's not a big deal. And Obama just wants everyone to think that climate change is the big deal. That's the huge national threat.
In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries in the area of health. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. DNA Force is one of the most expensive formulas to produce. Some of the ingredients in DNA Force are $12,000 a kilogram. We are using the coveted, patented, only American source of PQQ, CoQ10, and more. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? Well, we're bringing you a total win-win. The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. We have produced a limited run of DNA Force, and it will take up to 12 weeks to produce more once we sell out. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. DNA Force from InfoWars Life.
The U.S. government is convinced it was China, and these are Chinese hackers working for the Chinese government.
And what would they hope to gain by doing this?
Well, it's really a treasure trove for them. They got the security clearance forms for all of the civilian employees of the U.S. government who had security clearances. Big intelligence agencies love to set up giant databases on their opponents. It's what we call here opponent research, and this would be a treasure trove for the Chinese, particularly when they combine it with some of the other hacks they've done in the last year on health insurance companies, other government agencies. It's just a gold mine for an intelligence agency.
Well, so effectively they would acquire intelligence which could be used to put pressure on individuals. Would that be the idea?
Or to get a sense of how Americans think or what their background is. It lets you get into your opponent's skin and figure out what they're likely to think about. And remember, for us, for the Chinese, we're a strange culture. That might be true for a lot of people in the world, but this will help them understand how Americans think and act. It doesn't look like a crime because we haven't seen the data sold on the black market. And usually this data is perishable. If a criminal steals it, they sell it as soon as they can. This hasn't gone up for sale.
This is not the first time this has happened. Could it have been prevented?
Sad but true. It happened to OPM, in fact, within the last year. And you have to wonder why they didn't. Maybe they thought, well, the Chinese have already broken in once. They won't be coming back. That was wrong. It's hard to prevent these things, though. When you think about it, giant banks spend tens of millions of dollars, and they can't prevent breaches. So I don't want to be too critical, but it might have been better if we'd paid a little more attention to defense.
And can we assume this is something that is being done in the other direction as well? What's the sort of international law on all of this?
There is no international law on espionage, and countries like it that way because the last thing they want to do is put themselves in a bind. This is one sovereign state spying on another, and the U.S. has told China, look, it is a two-way street. You spy on us, we spy on you. We don't like it when you steal intellectual property, but for national security, it's a sovereign's right to do that. So international law pretty much says, do what you want, just don't get caught.
And what about interference online, if you like, cyber attacks or cyber blocks? Is there any law or convention preventing that?
Last year, the UN managed to agree that international law applies to cyberspace. And that includes the laws of armed conflict, the laws of war. So what you see now is agreement that countries have to think about all the things they think about when they use any weapon: humanity, proportionality, discrimination. It sounds funny, but it is a step in the right direction. There are rules that say if you use this kind of thing against another country, it is an attack, it violates the UN Charter, it gives them the right to defend themselves. So on the military side, we've made a little more progress than on the intelligence side.
Many people are asked to provide information about themselves online for potential employers or for public agencies of one kind or another, or indeed for commercial agencies. Is there anything we can do to protect ourselves?
Not a heck of a lot. Last year, probably over 1 billion people had their records breached. It's just the way the internet works now. Now, of course, those 1 billion people didn't experience crime or harm or damage for the most part, right? So there's not a lot you can do, but you're really not at that much risk.
I mean, for example, at Apple, they're suggesting that encryption is the way for people to protect themselves.
Encryption would definitely be a move in the right direction. The U.S. released strong encryption 15 years ago. I was one of the people that did that. We thought everyone would use it, and it was just too hard. It's hard to encrypt your stuff. It slows things down. So the theory now is, well, maybe the big service providers, the Googles or the Apples or the Deutsche Telekoms, the BTs of the world, they'll encrypt your stuff for you. If people did that, they would be a lot safer, but it remains to be seen if folks will be willing to take that extra step.
And of course, some governments, like the British government, actually want a softening of encryption because of the fight on crime and terror. Is that the way to go?
That's just something that's been around for a couple decades. When the GSM standards for mobile phones were developed, it used a kind of encryption, and it was written in cooperation with European security agencies so that they'd be able to read it. It may not be fair, it's probably not a good idea, but that's how the world has worked. Maybe it's time to change that, but every government tries to get an inside advantage when it comes to encryption.
News Channel, I'm Ephraim Graham. The cyber war between the U.S. and China is intensifying. Chinese hackers have accessed designs for some of the nation's most advanced weapons. U.S. officials are calling it a staggering security breach. The cyber war with China is being called the greatest national security challenge facing the U.S. Now, after months of computer security breaches involving Chinese hackers, officials say the blueprints of at least 29 critical U.S. weapon systems have been compromised. That includes the Black Hawk helicopter, the Navy's missile defense system, and even the state-of-the-art F-35 jet fighter.
It tracks really nicely with Chinese military priorities. How do you beat U.S. air defenses? How do you let China attack our carriers? How do you preserve China's ICBMs from U.S. missile defense? How do you get advantage in the air and in the sea?
A Pentagon study published by the Washington Post says the U.S. sustained staggering losses. The Obama administration has called on China to stop cyber theft. Military experts believe the operation is part of the People's Liberation Army's Cyber Command, authorized by the highest levels of China's military.
It really narrows the gap and it shades the odds in China's direction. We still are militarily superior, no doubt about that, but we're not as superior as we were before all this happened. So some serious risk as a result of these Chinese successes.
Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is heading to Southeast Asia to discuss cybersecurity, and President Obama is expected to raise the issue with China's leader next month at a summit in Southern California.
It's something we raise very directly with the Chinese, and we're going to do so through diplomatic channels and be very consistent.
Google has revealed another bout of China-based internet hacking, this time targeting the personal Gmail accounts of senior U.S. officials, Chinese activists, and journalists. Google says on their official blog that the attacks originated from Jinan City. It's home to one of the 6 technical offices of China's People's Liberation Army and a technical college linked to a hacking episode on Google last year. Google says the Chinese hackers tried to use malware and phishing scams to steal email passwords of hundreds of Gmail users. The aim? To read and forward the victims' email messages. Google says they've detected and disrupted the campaign. They did not specifically name the Chinese government as being behind it, but they did blame the government in a similar case of Gmail interference back in March. U.S. authorities, including the FBI, are investigating this latest incident. The White House says they don't believe any official U.S. government email accounts have been hacked.